and chair the meeting. And please be sure to, because I don't do this that often anymore, and I get my face in this iPad. If I don't see your hand up, just please give me a little tickler, okay?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for chairing tonight.
Of course. Are we ready to start? Is everybody okay to start? All right. Then I'll call this meeting to order. Could we have a roll call, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Counselor Jamie Cassett. Here. Counselor Signy Lindell. Counselor Pilar Faulkner.
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia.
Here.
And Counselor Carol Rivera-Worth.
I'm here. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda from staff?
Madam Chair, there is one change. We will be removing item R from the agenda for the Finance Committee. It will go forth to governing body for discussion.
We have a motion on the
Move to approve
Second.
as amended.
as amended.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay. From the consent agenda, we have items E, F, I, E, and S hold. Do we have any others?
One more item, that would be item V as in Victor.
E as in Victor. Okay.
Motion to approve as amended. Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve as amended and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Point of order, Madam Chair, I think we have somebody on Zoom, so we may have to do a roll call for this.
We have someone on what? Oh, okay, let's do a roll call.
Counselor Cassett.
Yes.
Counselor Lindell.
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner.
Yes.
Counselor Garcia.
Yes.
Counselor Romero-Worth.
Yes.
And that motion passes.
Thank you. Let's go on to presentations. Item A, internal audit program overview. Have a presentation, correct?
Yes, Chair. IT, there should be a panelist, Haley, and Haley will be presenting.
We've promoted Hallie.
Thank you.
Hello, can you all hear me?
We can. Thank you, Haley. Please.
Okay.
Please say your
Thank you.
name for us.
Yes, my name is Haley Garcia. I'm a partner here at Moss Adams, and I work with Layla and team carrying out the city's internal audit function. So excited to be here today.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay, I will go ahead and share my screen. Sure this will work. Okay, let me know when you all can see it.
We can see it.
Okay, so this is the internal audit program that was approved by the audit committee at their last meeting. It presents 2 fiscal years of a proposed audit program. I'll go through the approved projects for fiscal year 2025, which we're about to start kicking off here soon. The first item is a carryover from last year's audit plan, which is to follow up on previous audits. So we have an inventory of all prior city internal audit findings and recommendations. And we'll be going through a validation process to go through and see which ones have been addressed, where recommendations can be verified as implemented, and then reporting back to the audit committee. The second one we'll be conducting this fiscal year is the month-end and year-end close internal control review. So really looking at the city's internal controls over financial reporting and close for those month-end closing procedures, as well as the annual year-end going into the audit, and looking for potentially opportunities to gain some efficiencies and improve controls in that function. The third will be looking at the fraud, waste, and abuse program within the city and providing some training to relevant personnel, as well as evaluating the way that the city is currently managing the FWA program to identify some, if there's opportunities to implement best practices and improvements for the program. The fourth is not an internal audit, but it's something that we do a lot of the time to help our clients make progress. One of the areas that a lot of local governments struggle with is having updated current policies and procedures for those key functions across the city. And so like most cities, the city of Santa Fe could definitely use help in those areas. And so we'll be spending a good amount of our time in this fiscal year helping the city go through a process of inventorying those policies and starting to make progress on updating them to be current and comprehensive. And the last one for this fiscal year will be a procurement operational review. So looking at the city's procurement process and identifying ways in which efficiency gains could be achieved, make the process more streamlined, more controlled, and to provide better value for the city. Going into fiscal year 2026, we'll be focusing on a grant management operational review and looking at the way that the city is managing grants and managing the compliance requirements that go along with those grants. Next is the cash balances internal audit, looking at the way that the city is receiving cash payments of all kinds across the city, how that's being handled, how they're reported, deposited, and looking at those controls. Next is a risk management operational review, assessing the city's risk management function, including what the staffing is within the risk and safety department, and looking at the structure and the processes. And the last will be a procurement process review, looking throughout the entire life cycle of the recruitment process and identifying potential bottlenecks, opportunities to improve and streamline. Here is the combined internal audit plan that went to the audit committee, showing the allocation of the internal audit budget for the next 2 fiscal years. And they cover those projects I just summarized. I will stop sharing and open it up for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to clarify, this plan was put together by the audit committee?
This plan was put together following the enterprise risk assessment as proposed projects from the internal audit function. It was approved by the audit committee after being presented. We updated it based on audit committee feedback and also developed it into a 2-year plan versus a 1-year plan, and then it was approved.
Thank you. Does anybody from the committee have questions on this? Councilor Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so I appreciate the quick overview of the report. And I know that there's another item on this, and I don't know if you're going to be going into that in more detail in regards to, you know, the whole idea behind having this type of report is, how do we use it? And so, you know, I think I maybe ask you to go into a little bit more of, why do we do the report in the first place? And how is that going to help us as a city to again, identify the things that we're doing well. Really target the things that we aren't doing well, and where do we go from here? And so, you know, what I see is a lot of times we get reports and you know, how do we use those to get better? I think that's really the bottom line to all of this. Where we're finding the deficiencies. We go back to even our financial audits, and you know, we focus a lot on the findings, and they say, well, findings are things that we shouldn't really focus on, but that's where we're deficient. And how do we use this report to really truly get down to making good managerial decisions for the organization of the city?
Definitely great feedback, and we'll definitely cover some more of that in the next presentation. We'll be going over enterprise risk management as well as kind of the purpose and the role of the internal audit function. So I'll hit on some of those things of how the city will hopefully be utilizing the results of the internal audit and how deploying ongoing follow-up and process improvements will be able to establish the internal audit function as something that is not give you a report and it goes on a shelf and, you know, maybe doesn't get looked at for a long time. Our goal is to work with the city to implement an ongoing internal audit function that results in risk management and improvements that we're coming back and reporting to those charged with governance on a regular basis about the improvements that are being seen.
Thank you. And I guess I'll wait until the next presentation and maybe have a few more questions. Thank you.
When is the next presentation?
Next one on the agenda.
Yeah, chairs tonight. It's just the next one on the agenda.
Oh.
Mhm.
Councilor Cassett.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And thank you for being here and for the presentation and for this work. I did have a quick, and I think that maybe the overview of this conversation. Right now, internal audit looks like we're focusing a lot here on some of the operations within the finance department, but that's not all that the internal audit looks at. And so I think that it would be important to put this into context because we frequently will get this confusion of what the internal audit is versus the external audit. And given the focus on finance and procurement, it sounds like some of those processes in the finance department, I could see how that could be the confusion of the crossover could be conflated here. But also that there are some other areas that we will continue to be looking at because this has a lot to do with just the processes at City Hall. And it's not just for finances. We take a look at HR, we take a look at every single one of our departments and how efficient we are being. So Layla, if you don't mind kind of giving a broader overview of this and how we are right now funneling into these topics, I think that would be helpful. I don't know if that's being covered next, but I think some context would be helpful there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. Councilor Cassett. So yes, we do look at all departments within the city. When we do internal audits, previously we've done police, we've done IT as well. These ones were based on the internal audit, the enterprise risk assessment, I'm sorry. And those were ones that we found were high priority. One of the year-end close. So that's an example of one when a department has welcomed that because we know that's a process that we really want to get really fine-tuned, especially after our external audits, and we're getting those on time. And that was a key aspect of getting those audits on time. So Director Oster, she asked to have that audit done because she knew that it was really important to getting our external. So yes, we do all types of, because this is a managerial tool, it really looks at how we can do our process in the city better. And so departments welcome audits because they feel as though they want to improve what they're doing. And so you are absolutely correct that there is, of course, crossover. And I think that really, I think we will go then into that. And Haley, if you could, when we go into that, you can focus on that aspect of it. But if you do look in 26, we do have a recruitment process. Procurement process will be how we do our procurement. So I think that it really is, I think you're spot on that. It's not just a financial tool.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that because I know so frequently when we say audit, we definitely think city finances. And so there really is just a much broader scope for the internal audit. And it does have to do a lot with efficiencies and holes in our processes and making sure that we are really functioning as best we can to deliver the services that we say we're going to. Obviously, that does help our external audit, but I appreciate that context.
Yeah, and I will also just add that when we talk about our follow-up audits, we will be following up on, as I mentioned, police, IT. We did a utility billing audit that we'll be following up on. There was an HR payroll that was done that we'll be following up on. So we don't let those documents just sit. We also make sure that we're following through and following up with them. So just a little tidbit.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Councilor Romero Worth, did you have anything you wanted to add? Okay. All right, let's go on to the next presentation. That is risk management overview.
Okay, all right, I'll share my screen again. Okay, can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so it goes right along the lines of some of the questions that the committee was asking. We wanted to take this opportunity to do a high-level presentation on what risk is, what risk management is, and how the internal audit function fits into enterprise risk management citywide. And I'll spend a little bit of extra time focusing on what the internal audit function is and how it's how we make it a comprehensive function, looking at risks, processes, people, systems across the city. All right, so defining risk. So what is risk? I'm sure you all have heard presentations and seen a prior report about this, but risk can be defined as the probability of an event occurring and the potential impact and consequences on the city. In its simplest terms, it's what's the chances that something are going to go wrong. When we're evaluating risk, whether it's within the enterprise risk assessment or within any of these individual internal audits, we looked at kind of four factors that go into assessing how risky a potential situation or occurrence is for the city. So we look at the impact and can we quantify what is the impact on the city's strategy, people, operations, systems, etc. We also look at the likelihood. Something might have a huge impact, but it's very unlikely that, let's say, a hurricane, natural disaster is going to happen, or something might be very likely, like changes in legislature or changes in policy. Then we look at preparedness. So what are the risk mitigation strategies that are already in place or are inherently in place to help protect the city if that risk is to occur? And then we also look at risk trajectory. So is it going up over time and the likelihood of occurrence is going up, or is it going down? So we use these four attributes to assess when we identify a risk for the city. Is it more or less critical to be looking at overall? So what types of risk does the city face? And I think as some of the committee members were discussing earlier, there's a lot of different risks that we focus on from an enterprise risk management perspective. So of course, there's the financial risk that the city could lose money, lose funding, have too high of expenses, etc. So that is where some of the internal audit function gets focused. Others are operational risks. So those risks that could potentially block or hinder the city's ability to achieve its mission to serve the public, or having fails when it comes to employees, policies, procedures, etc. Next is management and governance. So looking at those risks that could impact the city's ability to effectively manage, as well as compliance with legal, tax, and other types of government practice requirements. Next is reputational risks. So those events that could cause the city to experience negative community perception, loss of trust in the community, controversy, or other. And then we look at external risks, and those would be the ones that are external to the city but could have a big impact, such as natural disasters, legislature change, economic turns, things like that sort. The general risk categories that we typically look at are up here, and these are just some examples of where things would fall into. So like was mentioned previously, a lot of times it is focused on financial risk, but that is not the only area. So yes, looking at procurement, which crosses financial and operational. This upcoming year, we'll be focusing on fraud, waste, and abuse, which is on the management and governance side. Looking at operational risks, we'll be looking at the recruitment process and how efficiently and effectively across the city the recruitment process happens. And we'll be looking at overall risk management strategies within the city in fiscal year 2026. So what is enterprise risk management? At its core, ERM is about developing a better understanding of the risks the organization faces and having a sustainable and repeatable process that can be implemented to monitor whether those risks are going up, are going down, if risk mitigation strategies are working, and are the strategies having the impact that they need to have. The term ERM can be thought of as the steps the city takes to maximize the likelihood of achieving the desired impact. Most ERM activities, so the different strategies that the city implements, are designed to identify potential events that can impact the city and manage those related risks. Very similar to what the enterprise risk assessment did, which guided the 2-year audit plan. It's identifying what are those risks, what do we need to look into further, and what operational or controls improvements do we need to put in place to help manage or decrease those risks. It's an ongoing process that flows throughout the city. So this isn't just about something that is done by the risk and safety department or by those charged with governance. It's something that impacts every level. And it is geared to support the city's objectives and is a means to an end, not an end in itself. It's not a one and done, something that we implement and then move forward. It's a philosophy and something that needs to be built into the city's policies, their processes, their governance, etc. So ERM goals are typically around ensuring that the city can implement its services and provide benefit to the community to achieve its missions while managing those risks that are going to be there one way or another. It's about creating safety and security for employees, for citizens across the board. It's about making sure that the city is compliant from a legal, from a tax perspective, and others. And it's also about looking at the financial health and making sure that the strategies, policies, and controls are in place to help set the city up for success from a finance position. The ERM lifecycle, which is very similar to what we do in the internal audit function, is identifying what those risks are and prioritizing how the city is going to address them. Understanding what the causes and consequences are of those risks to understand the resources that should be put forth to address them. Responding to the risks through putting risk mitigation and management strategies in place, and then monitoring the risk and reporting on the status, which we'll talk about in the internal audit overview here coming up. So as I mentioned, risk mitigation is a strategy that is implemented across the city at every level. At the management and staff level, it's really about carrying out the processes, the controls, and the policies that leadership gives guidance on. At the management level, it is typically around the decision-making, the direction, the workplace culture. And at the city council level, it's really that strategic decision-making and direction for along with the financial oversight, the ethics tone, etc. Internal audit plays a key role in all of this. So just wanted to give the committee a little bit of background on the internal audit function. The city retained Moss Adams to serve as the designated internal auditor or last fiscal year and conduct projects focusing on risks, internal controls, efficiency and effectiveness, best practices, and compliance. So again, it is a very holistic approach that we'll talk about here in just a moment. Just to give the city a little bit of background, our first two projects as the city's internal auditor were an enterprise risk assessment to take the landscape of the city's risks across the board. And the second project, which we'll be reporting on at a future committee meeting, it is just wrapping up, is an internal control review. So that's looking across all city departments and looking at internal controls at a high level to prioritize where there are potential holes or gaps or where efforts need to be focused from a management and also from an internal audit perspective. Our internal audit plan, which was presented prior to this presentation, lays out what are we going to look at over the next 2 fiscal years. We always try to have a combination to make sure that we're not just looking at internal controls or we're not just looking at risks. We're also looking at performance, which would be opportunities to improve efficiency across the city, make things more consistent, make functions or departments more effective, and help them better support the carrying out of the mission for the city. Some of our projects, when we come to, let's say, the grant management operational review, will really be looking at how is the city ensuring compliance with the decentralized model of managing grants across the city, looking at opportunities where there might be risks and whether mitigation strategies can be implemented. Like was mentioned before, city functions that'll be reviewed is over a course of time. The internal audit function should hit every single city department and every single city function. Some projects are specifically focused on one area. So month end and year end close is very finance heavy. However, other projects like recruitment, although it has an HR function, it also is looking citywide at the recruitment practices. When we look at grant management, it's looking at how all city departments are managing grant funding. So we do try to look as citywide over the span of a couple of years. In establishing the city's internal audit function, there are several key factors to success. One is understanding the goals and objectives. So making sure through that enterprise risk assessment, through the internal controls review, making sure that we're seeking input from a variety of stakeholders and making sure that we've adequately defined what the goals and objectives are and how we're going to measure success within the internal audit function. Next is educating and communicating. So really defining what are the roles of management, what are the roles of internal audit, what are the roles of those departments that'll be participating in the audits, and what are the roles of those charged with governance. Establishing the program baseline, like I had mentioned, performing those entity-wide assessments, and then bringing together an internal audit plan and measuring success as far as carrying out the plan and seeing those improvements through follow-up internal audits as we go. And then carrying out the program, conducting those internal audits in accordance with the approved plan, coming back to those charged with governance and reporting on the results. Like Layla had mentioned, tracking those findings and recommendations so that we can say, as of today, the city has X number of internal audit findings outstanding, and then evaluating whether recommendations have been implemented and whether the city is seeing improvements and the results from that. In any individual internal audit, these are our 4 phases that we go through. So we do startup and management, really defining what are we going to look at during the audit, where are those high risk and where should we be focusing our resources. We go through a fact-finding phase to make sure that we understand what the city is currently doing, what the people, processes, and technology are in the area. A lot of times we'll administer surveys to make sure that we're getting input from a large variety of stakeholders, and we define what we're going to be focusing on for the individual audit. In analysis, we conduct sample-based testing, we do efficiency studies, we do data mining analysis, additional interviews, and other to really assess how the city is functioning in that potential area to, in the end, develop recommendations on where are the risks, where can controls be implemented, and where are there opportunities for efficiency and effectiveness gain. Any individual project, depending on the area, takes usually around 3 to 4 months. So we're usually doing a couple concurrently to carry out the 5 or 6 defined projects each fiscal year. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee? Councilor Garcia?
Let me get to where I was at. Thank you, Haley, for the kind of the overview. You know, going back to my first kind of question over the previous presentation in regards to this now. Have we had, is this the first risk assessment that has been done? And maybe that might be for staff or for the city manager's office.
Chair, Councilor Garcia, this is not the first enterprise risk assessment. I haven't seen the ones from prior to my time here. This is the first one that was done since I've been here. So I don't know. They were done by a different firm.
Miss Garcia, is there a knowledge on your part from Moss Adams that you have done any other previous reports for the city?
Moss Adams has not. The way that I believe the city used to deploy a strategy where they would have individual internal audits be outsourced to different service providers or different firms. And the Moss Adams was brought in to serve as the dedicated internal auditor that is actually going through the whole risk assessment process, developing an audit plan, and carrying out an internal audit plan. To my knowledge, I believe it was contracting out one-off projects in the past, and the last risk assessment would have been done 5+ years ago, I believe.
Thank you. Deputy City Manager Archuleta. So I don't know if you've had any discussion with the city manager or others in the administration as to how we're going to take this information and really create a plan to try to address some of these issues. Because when you're looking at the report and you see where it shows the actual risk in each department, which is somewhat alarming in some of the areas. And I don't know, again, how do we take this information and truly use it to make good decisions? Because I just would like to see if this has been, is it just going to be a report, or is it going to be something that we're going to use?
Chair Counselor Garcia, we absolutely will use this. Again, as I mentioned before, this is definitely a management tool. This is one of the reasons this function originally was located in the finance department. We moved it out and moved it into the city manager's office because we felt as though, one, it was a neutral party, but also we could follow through with that. The management as the city manager's office, we can work with our departments to make sure that these are implemented. So we do mention the previous audits. So those were done by other firms, and they are internal audits that were done. And so just like those ones, along with this one, we will be following up. For example, once Moss Adams came on as our dedicated internal auditors, we reached out to all the departments who had internal audits done before, and we asked them for updates on all of those, all of their findings. And so Moss Adams will go through those findings and determine what actions need to be done to continue on that process. So absolutely, it is more than just a report for us. It is a management tool so that we can really be the best that we can be. Not only that, but it keeps us compliant. And, we do talk about how there's a lot of areas where there is high risk, which is, as Haley mentioned, it is a term that they use. But the internal auditors would absolutely, if there was something alarming or if there was something that they identified within their auditing, that would be brought to our attention immediately, and they would make sure that it would be addressed. And we would make sure that you were all brought into that conversation as well as part of our leadership. And with the report, the enterprise risk assessment, part of that, and this was done prior to some of our newly elected counselors, they were interviewed for that. So a lot of this feedback is actually from you all, letting us know what was important to you. And we wanted to make sure that was taken into account when we were working on the enterprise risk assessment and our risk and our audit plan for the next 2 years.
Next question I'll have is for Haley. So in the report, this is the page 4 of the report where it shows high risk. And I'm not going to pick on any one specific department just because I want to. Can you explain, just as an example, the capital improvement program? Maybe explain a little bit for those that are interested in this as to why the impact is high, the likelihood is high, the preparedness is low, and then the trajectory is increasingly /low. And just so we can kind of get a bearing as to what that means.
Yes, so I was not the one who did this full project. She presented at the audit committee when we actually presented the entire report, but I can speak to what I know within the report. So within the capital improvement program, we found that there were risks associated with the program, including within the planning, the financing process, the construction closeout, and the capital asset management, tracking and reporting. We looked at several areas, including the Public Works Department and how they were managing the capital improvement program. The current city program includes approximately 82 projects. And so looking at how from a high level the risk was managed in that area, we found that given the size of 82 projects, it accounts for about $800 million of funding right now. We found that the impact is high. The likelihood of something potentially going wrong in these areas was considered high, given the number of projects and the way that the reporting, the planning, the designing process was working. The preparedness area we noted as low. Reading into some of the reasons why, it was based on a lot of the feedback that we gained in interviews on some of those risk mitigation strategies throughout the capital improvement plan. And the trajectory was increasing given the volume of capital programs has been increasing, but it was increasing at a low rate.
Thank you. And I think that, back again to management's perspective is how do we move the needle? Because I think a lot of the times people will reach out to us as their elected officials and say, why did you guys spend all that money on, how much did this cost us, this report?
Counselor Garcia, I'm not sure I'd have to look back on our invoices from last year on how much we paid out last year. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Could it be 100,000, 200,000?
Oh, no, absolutely not. No,
60,000?
no.
Not
I think between multiple, we probably paid out about 60,000 last year, but it was multiple different audits.
Thank you. So, back again, as us being especially from the finance perspective, looking at what these reports cost us, how are we using them? In other words, that's my main concern. And if we're not moving the needle with this, then, ultimately it comes back to us as governing body members, to you all as managers of the city. And so I really want to point that out in regards to, we need to get better at moving the needle with this. Basically points, I appreciate the questions, the answers, and I'll yield the floor for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Cassett?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I think that the understanding of the process and how this impacts it is really important. And so Counselor Garcia, I believe this was before your time, but because it was at the beginning of my time. But I have a very salient memory of the police evidence room. And this was a really big project that via internal audit, they identified a number of issues. And from that, there were procedural changes within the police department. That's also, I believe, why we changed our body cams and our whole system. So it resulted in that process so that there was a chain of, what's the word?
Command?
Not a chain of command, a chain of possession would be that basically we know who had what, where, and when did they pass it off. And so there were some systems changes and processes changes that came out of that internal audit. So I did want to bring that up because that was an example of how this was actually utilized and what the result was from the perspective of the city and how things were implemented in a way to improve. And then I recall, I believe when I first got here is when all of that was being implemented. And then I do recall maybe a year or so later at some point, we did get another report that said, hey, you did all these things. And now here's the result based on that. So, to that end, I found that to be really helpful. And obviously that really stuck in my mind. I seem to recall something similar with utility billing, but it sounds like, I know a big piece of that has been the transition over to the new billing system that has been an ongoing saga, as we are all aware. But what I did want to do is it's again kind of some context setting, because if you're just tuning in now to this report, understanding the internal audit process, where it comes from, how it is set, and a little bit about the role of the audit committee and the need for it to have some distance from us, because this is a bit of a check and balance on both the city council and the administration of making sure that there's not that influence on an internal audit, based on politics or what have you, but that there is this outside party that is coming in and is providing a neutral perspective on where the things that the city needs to be improving. And this audit committee, which is it's appointed by the municipal judge, not us, because again, giving some distance between the branches of government. So Layla, if you don't mind going into a little bit of that information around, the ordinance that sets this up, if you have any history as to why we moved in this direction, because I know it is relatively recent, I believe, I might be wrong there, but I think it's like in the, 16, 17, something like that we started this and it moved from a different process. I'll stop talking because that might be poor information, but over to you.
Thank you, Councilor Cassett. So, I actually don't, off the top of my head, I don't want to speak out of turn on the internal, how the audit committee came to be. I know there was some process that I'm aware, but I don't want to speak out of memory and be incorrect. So, but I will say the audit committee, they oversee both the internal and the external audit. They are citizens. So lots of times they're accountants. We have, by ordinance, we have to have lawyers we have to have CPAs on the committee. And yes, you're right, that is municipal judge that does appoint them. And then they look at our audit plan, and they are actually the individuals that have the jurisdiction over making changes based on the enterprise risk assessment, and then also what comes to finance committee. So it was their recommendation that this presentation is at finance tonight. Haley, I'm not sure if you all have any more context on our ordinance. I know you all have read that pretty extensively.
Yeah, the ordinance is a little unclear of what the audit committee's role is within internal audit versus what the finance committee's role is. It says that the finance committee has to view the annual audit plan, but that it alludes to the fact that the audit committee is the one that originally approves the audit plan. What we are doing is working with Layla, just because there is some ambiguity in how the process should work, is we're working with Layla to identify what is the standard process going to be going forward, and we'll be presenting that at the next audit committee meeting. So when it comes to these reports, whenever reports are coming, whenever follow-up internal audit are presented, what is the process of, does the audit committee review and approve and accept the audit report, or does that also need to go through the finance committee and to the full council before they are finalized and become public documents? There isn't currently a defined process, and given that the ordinance is more high level into what the roles of the various committees are, we'll be defining a proposed plan for how we can carry that out going forward. In most cities, it is the audit committee that is charged with that role of approving the audit plan, receiving and approving the individual internal audit reports that come, guiding any changes or variations from the internal audit plan. And then typically whatever is approved at the audit committee level goes as just for information, a consent agenda item to the full council. So that might be the process that we end up recommending.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that context, because I know that there were some conversations previously when the audit report came out, had not yet gone to the audit committee, and some concern expressed by some members of the governing body that we hadn't received it yet. However, us receiving it before the audit committee could potentially be us not complying with our own ordinances. So I'm happy to hear that there will be some of that, those processes more readily defined, especially as we have more experience with this. And that has been my understanding from conversations, that it really does have a lot to do with, and that, as you mentioned, best practices in other cities. Frequently, the audit committee acts pretty independently of us, again, for those reasons of wanting to really have a check on the different branches of government. And this is one of the ways by which we're able to do that in a more neutral manner, as opposed to, again, how things might be influenced by elected officials, and really getting that that third party neutral group that are able to provide a lot of guidance. And of course, we are working with people that have a very specific skill set and professional backgrounds and expertise, so that they really are able to apply that. So I just did want to make sure that that was put into context for anyone listening. If this is the first internal audit that anyone's tuned into, that this is not a one-off. This is something set by ordinance. There is a process that has been put into place. Good to know that there are some things that it sounds like we will be defining more thoroughly, because I know that is always helpful, and it usually takes a couple rounds of experience for us to find something that then makes us question it. So look forward to seeing what those changes are as we move forward. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Anyone else? Pardon me. Counselor Faulkner.
So I have a question for you. What role did employee satisfaction play in this audit? Do you think it had a role in some of the answers that in the employee survey? I've dabbled in audits a little bit professionally, and it always raises a flag to me when everything is moderate to high moderate, or high moderate to moderate high. And it just seems like it's too neutral for what's showing up on the side that the risk management team did. I mean, if you're comparing the employee survey outcomes to what the risk management team did, there's some big gaps there. So I'm just wondering what role do you think employee satisfaction played in this audit?
Well, for the enterprise risk assessment specifically, and just to provide a little bit of clarity, the enterprise risk assessment is just that. It's an assessment of where the risk landscape is today. And it is used as, like Layla mentioned, a management tool to say, here is the combination of the risk for the city and what the objective risk trajectory and impact, et cetera, are. But it's also used to guide the internal audit plan and where we should be focusing and reporting back to those charged with governance. When it comes to employee satisfaction, we definitely know and have learned through the enterprise risk assessment process that employee satisfaction can definitely change or skew the results. As a result, the employee survey that went out, I think it went out to around 1,100 employees. There was a relatively low response rate, which is pretty typical in local government, honestly. The ratings of individual staff members did not impact the final risk ratings that went in the risk assessment report. It is used to get that broader input and taken into consideration as we're assessing different areas. However, the impact of how employees rated certain areas does not impact the final risk ratings that went in the enterprise risk assessment. So just to provide that clarity, because it can be very skewed based on employee satisfaction or certain employees' views. And it is pretty common for employees to rate moderate risk down the board, just go for the middle line, and then take a couple of areas that they believe are high or low.
Then was this a blind survey?
No, it was not, but the results came straight to Moss Adams. So we did ask for employee name and department and function so that we could utilize that information for our purposes in preparing for interviews and others, but the results are accumulated and presented in total.
So just my experience has been in dealing with employee surveys that you can get better results with blind surveys than you can with people having to put their name on the document on the survey. So
I do believe they had the option. I do believe they had the option to put the name, and then the department, I believe, was required.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Counselor Romero Worth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I lost my place in the memo I was just reading, but on September 25th, 2017, you'll all remember the McCard report. that is where we made the pivot after that report came out to change the way we do internal audits. And so I would, I know there are a number of items that have been pulled tonight, and I don't want to prolong this, but on page 20 of 37 were some recommendations about how we were doing internal audits. We had one city employee who was in charge of the internal audits. The report outlines why that wasn't effective, made recommendations about things that needed to happen, definitely noted that we were out of compliance with some of the things Haley has mentioned about the standards that have to be adhered to, the general accepted government auditing standards, or GAGS, I think. GACS, is that how you say it? The city's own internal audit ordinance, and just the necessity for a formal peer review, which is, I think, partially where the audit committee itself probably came from, but also the recommendation to contract out this work. So just would refer the committee back to that report as some of the history where all of this work is falling from. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Anyone else? All righty. Then we will move on. We have one more report, benefits presentation.
Hello, Madam Chair, Councilors. My name is Alvin Valdez. I'm the Wellness and Benefit Supervisor for the City of Santa Fe. We're here to present on our annual end of the year benefits presentation to let you know the performance of our benefits for this year. So right now I'll introduce Todd Burley from Aon, our benefits consultants advisors.
Good evening, everyone. As Alvin said, I'm Todd Burley, one of the city's health consultants with Aon. And I would just like to review some final financial results for the last fiscal year ending June 30th. As you can see in column A of the report, enrollment increased slightly by about 1%.
Sorry, Madam Chair, can we get the presentation on the screen so public could see it as it's moved through it?
Ben, or could you all put it on the screen? It should be in PrimeGov. I think it's coming on.
Thank you. So column A is the last fiscal year. You can see in row 1, enrollment increased slightly. There was an average of 1,128 employees enrolled on the health plan during the fiscal year. In row 7, the City of Santa Fe funding level was slightly above 22 million. That includes both the city's contributions and the employees' paycheck contributions. In row 9, you'll see that was 2.6% higher than the previous fiscal year. That is somewhat misleading in that there were three paycheck months in fiscal year 2023 and only 2 in fiscal year 2024. The actual increase weighted out to about 6.5%, borne both by the city and the employees. About $22 million in revenue. In row 10, claims paid were about 19.3 million. Row 11, fixed costs about 2.6 million. That includes both administration paid to Cigna and premiums for stop loss coverage, for a total of a little under 21.9 million, or a very slight surplus of 213,000. And going to the final row, row 16, about 1%. Funding exceeded expenses by about 1%. Row 15 shows that was a 15% increase over the previous fiscal year in terms of costs per member per month. That is largely due to an increase in spending on pharmacy, which has been seen both locally, statewide, and nationally. On the following page, you'll see that same information that was summarized on the previous page, just on a monthly basis. No changes here again, just shows that same information monthly. Moving to the third page. This shows the dental results for the fiscal year. Overall, there was about a $30,000 surplus on the dental plan for the year ending June 30th. And the dental plan has run a surplus for many, many years, and no changes have been made to either benefits or funding for that plan. And on the final page, what is predominantly the driver of costs for the city of Santa Fe, this shows high cost claimants, which are defined as claimants who exceeded $125,000 in paid claims for the fiscal year. The city has a stop loss policy at $250,000, meaning that the city will pay the first $250,000 of any claimant, and Cigna is responsible for any amounts above that. You can see in the last fiscal year, that top box, there were 2 claimants who exceeded $250,000. Prior year, there was only 1 claimant. Both of these years are substantially below what the city has averaged in terms of high cost claimants over the past 5, 6, 7 years. That concludes the presentation. I will stand for question.
Anyone have any questions? Counselor Faulkner?
What happens with the surplus?
Madam Chair, Counselor Faulkner, it remains in our reserve balance for the future fiscal year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Counselor Romero Worth, are you there? Do you have a question?
All set, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here tonight. I thought it was interesting in that presentation how very, very, very close the claims were. Pulling that back up on the large claimants were within $6,000 of each other last year and this year. A little astounding when you're talking about 1.7 million and it was within $6,000. Coincidence? Probably. All right, thank you. Okay, moving moving on. We're now on the consent agenda. The first item E and F were pulled, and I pulled those I can discuss both of them at the same time. Do you want to introduce those?
Certainly, Madam Chair, I can read both of those off. And we do have Karen Iverson joining us virtually tonight for those items.
Okay, thank you.
Item E, request for approval of the State of New Mexico Department of Finance and Administration Capital Appropriation Project Grant Agreement 22-G3017 in the amount of $1.1 million to improve infrastructure to support redevelopment at Midtown with a reversion date of June 30th, 2026. That also includes the request for approval of a budget amendment resolution to allocate $1.1 million from the 2022 capital appropriation to fiscal year 25 revenue and expenses for the Midtown redevelopment project. And I will turn it over to staff.
Okay, I just have a couple of questions about this. So we're talking about $5 million between these two items. They look like they are different source, but well, they're not different source, but the intention is the same for both of them. Their infrastructure, correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's correct.
Well, initially, why are they broken out into two tranches?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for that question. They're broken out into two separate packets because they're two separate grant agreements. They're from the legislative session. So one was from 2022, I think was just read in the motion, and the other one's from 2023. And so since they're separate grant agreements, we need separate motions, separate packets. You'll see there's a bit of duplication in the memo and the attachments, but that's why. And then there are also bars associated with each one as well. So that makes 4 actions in all. So it's really the best to be in 2, but the legislature appropriated funds in 2022 session and then again in 2023 session. And that's why there's 2 separate packets.
Okay, do we have these, do we have specific projects that these funds are going to?
Yes, we do, Madam Chair. Actually, as you can see by the detailed critical path schedule that's an attachment, all of those activities cost money. So, Director Iverson is on the Zoom as well, and she can answer this, but we do manage a cash flow tracking sheet. So we've got expenses for all of the land use entitlement work that we've had to do, the parcelization, surveying boundaries, mapping the master plan into conceptual phase into the physical ground, telling us where those boundaries work and don't, because it all went from a very sort of conceptual phase master plan, and now we're moving into a very concrete phase of designing and building infrastructure. And so there's work in that parcelization work. There's project management work. We're almost done with the stormwater, site-wide stormwater plan. That was about $400,000. We'll be moving into design. We're actually developing the scope for the infrastructure design right now. We'll be engaging a contractor to do that. If we have a rough order of magnitude $30 million infrastructure construction project, then you can roughly estimate that the design work will be 20% of that cost. So that's around $6 million. So we do have quite a few infrastructure focused pieces of work that this money will be used for. And then as the committee knows, there's been other money appropriated to Midtown as well for activation and interim stabilization. And so some of those things can't be paid by this grant and need to be paid by the city. They're less permanent infrastructure. Oh, and there's other things as well as the demolition of the buildings we're mapping out on the plan. We have buildings that need to go because they cross parcel lines. We have buildings that need to go because they're unrepairable and they cause nuisance on the campus. And they have, so we're prepared to really get this campus into redevelopment, and we're investing in the infrastructure using these grant monies.
These large blocks of money will, like you were just saying, that some buildings have to come down. Will we, as part of the process, that we will put out for bid do we break these projects down so that for example, taking down a building, do we put that out to bid and see how many bids we get for that? And then, depending on what those bids are, will those projects come back to to this committee or to the council?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for that question. It's a combination, actually. So as you see on your agenda tonight, there's a couple of engineering services contracts, and you've been seeing them come through the committee council process, about 2 every time. There's one with Bohannon Houston on there right now. Those are our on-call engineering services contracts. And so we'll have, in the end, I think we'll have like 6 or 7, how many? 7 of them. And they're there so that we can, without having to go out to bid every time, which is like a minimum 6-month process if you have a scope of work and you go out to bid. So we did a procurement to get qualified vendors. And then what we do is we write our scope of work, as I said, we're doing for the design. And then we'll give that to multiple ones of our on-call contractors. They'll give us quotes. We'll evaluate their qualification, skills, availability, and pricing, and then and negotiate pricing even at that point to award purchase orders. Those ones won't come back to the governing body. But there's another process that's very similar. We use the CES, Cooperative Education Services Cooperative Purchasing. They have many vendors that can provide services that are described in some of the scopes that we need to do. In those cases, we'll do the same thing. We'll take multiple vendors that are on the CES, give them scopes of work, get quotes back from them, evaluate them. It's not a formal procurement process because the vendors are already procured by CES, but we do evaluate a best fit, best value. And then in that case, we do have to establish a contract if it's over $60,000. And that if it's under 200, it goes to the city manager for approval. And if it's over 200, it comes to the governing body. So those are our 2 most common kind of pathways.
Well, I don't really personally have any way of evaluating these things. You know, I have a plumber come over for a leaky faucet. I don't have massive infrastructure projects that I deal with. My concern, my underlying concern all the time is, and I pulled these other 2 items also tonight, item P and item S. My concern is that we pass these very, very sizable multi-million-dollar packages of money, and I don't think that the contractors are very motivated to give us what would be a bid that they felt like they were competing with another contractor that they would like to have this work. And it's always a tripping place for me on these contracts, because I don't think what's it called, CES? I don't think they give us a good deal. I don't think they negotiate good deals at all. I think they just find somebody that fills out the paperwork or qualified. And I think the prices that people charge us sometimes are absolutely unconscionable. The amount of money that we have to pay as a city for some of these contractors. And I'm not, honestly, Director Wheeler, I'm not putting this on you. I'm just saying that we don't have a very good mechanism for getting the most value for our monies. And it bothers me because it's been going on for a very, very long time. I mean, you and I have talked about a certain footbridge that is going to take $1 million in engineering. It's like, that cannot be. That is not possible. I feel like we're taken advantage of with this, and I don't know how to put a stopgap in this for the city. We never touch a project or an engineering firm. I mean, we're going to approve millions of dollars we do it all the time, millions and millions of dollars for on-call engineering firms. And I don't think it motivates them to sharpen their pencil when they give bids to us. So I don't know that there's a question in that. I think it's a statement. I'm pretty frustrated with it. It's been going on for a long time. And I don't know how we correct it. So that's where I am with this. It bothers me. Anybody else? Counselor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Point well taken. I think that it definitely is something that is frustrating when you're looking at what a project potentially really what it takes to really do that. And it's hard because coming from the side of contractors, there are a lot of expenses that are done. And so that is concerning as well. And I think that are we just not getting enough interest from other contractors? Are there not enough contractors? Do they have do you see that a lot of times do they have that leverage, I guess? And we're almost forced to say, hey, we've got to get this done, and this is what we're going to have to pay for it. And I think that's when there's not enough competition in the market of people who are certified to do these type of jobs. How do we save the city some money? Because at the end of the day, it really does translate into taxpayers' dollars that we're responsible for.
Thank you so much, Councilor Garcia, for that question. I would love to share some insights with you. Actually, by having 7 engineering firms on our on-call contracts, it does give us quite amount of leverage. They all know they're all on contract. We do get, as I said, we develop the scope of work. We give them to each 3. We usually select about 3 that seem well suited. We do give it to all 3 of them. They know they're competing when they give us a price quote. We have actually responsibility by the Brooks Act, which is part of federal procurement that we must comply with because we use a lot of federal dollars to negotiate the price at the end to a fair price. We do know what these fair prices are. 20% is rule of thumb. That is how much you should pay for a project. Construction prices have gone through the roof. Engineering prices have also increased. Engineering firms are now having to pay their engineers up to double what they were paying them a couple of years ago to get them. I don't know if you saw, but the DOT just put out an announcement that they're doing like 25% increases for their engineers, which makes a very competitive marketplace. We try to hire engineers, the firms do. So having our 7 on-call contracts in the engineering space specifically, but we also have construction on-calls as well, gives us quite a bit of leverage actually, and makes a lot of the city's most important issue right now is price, absolutely, fair price, absolutely, but availability to do the work. We have so many capital projects going on right now and so much opportunity with all the federal money coming in, the one-time funding coming in, the legislative money that's all been coming in for 4 years of legislative money just came in the door, over $40 million. The important thing for the city is also to have capacity and the ability. And so the governing body, with the decisions they've been making, have been taking care of both of those things by having multiple contractors to be able to compete against each other, have them already on contract, so it's a very efficient process, and have the capacity available to deliver all of these capital programs. So it's I think the city is managing this really, really well. And this is how you do it.
Thank you. And that just kind of takes me to a comment because we're kind of darned if you do and you're darned if you don't. And at the same time, you can look back and say, well, if we didn't take steps to do this, we're not moving forward. And yeah, it does give me some heartburn also because you see the type of money that we're pushing out for any given project. I mean, as Councilor Lindell said, a bridge at $1 million, it's kind of tough to swallow, but it's still something that needs to get done. And so I guess from your perspective and as a director, how do we get creative in prioritizing obviously things that need to be done? And because if we don't make steps forward, then, we're really taking a bigger loss by not making these decisions. So those are just comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Casa.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And thank you for that, Counselor Garcia. I think that you brought out, some of the things I was wondering around You know, it's not like we are just paying blind. You know, there are mechanisms in place to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible while also getting this work done. I do agree that, you know, there's this balance that we have to strike. I remember actually reading an article 7 years ago or something. And it had to do with this comparing Canada and the US. And it was like, why is the US infrastructure failing? Why are we crumbling? Whereas just, you know, across the border, I think it may have been comparing, you know, cities that were, you know, right next to each other. And it really had to do with an investment in infrastructure that Canada had made. I know that this one is hard, and it is important that we are as fiscally responsible as possible. However, I think that we have all seen what happens when the investment in infrastructure is not made. Because we are now facing a lot of these conversations around this deferred maintenance. We have a lot of conversations around what's going on with our streets. And we have a lot of hopes for Midtown. So you know, I've always been an advocate of Midtown, of having to invest in it what we need to, knowing that our return on investment cannot always be measured in finances, in dollars, and how much we are selling or leasing, but also in the quality of life and the social impact that it will have on the city, on that part of the city. However, Director Wheeler, I do want to get a little bit more information because, you know, with you and your staff, you are doing this work regularly, and you are in contact with people. So there's not, you know, at DOT and in other areas, so there's not a lack of understanding around what would be reasonable. And I appreciate you pointing out that there's 7. So we have created a pool of competition within the city by having these multiple on-call contracts. And again, you know, for the public, these on-call contracts, there is an up to amount. There is no guarantee that we will actually utilize these contracts or pay these individuals or these companies how much, you know, this much money. They have to be doing the work. But can you provide a little bit of information on, you know, this is a challenging time. We've seen inflation. We've seen construction costs rising. We've seen, you know, a lot of competition, especially in New Mexico, where we do have a dearth of some of these professions among the private and the public sector. How are you all staying on top of what would be considered reasonable, what we should expect to see, so that, you know, we're not in a situation where we are essentially paying out blind?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, for that question. Well, yes, we have a number of ways of doing that. One of the ways that we do it is that we have different project leads, different project managers who go to training with DOT, who go to training with the Federal Transit Administration. And in fact, so they get lessons about what expectations are, what trends are. And in fact, DOT does audits of our road projects. So they actually audit, they in fact, the DOT and DFA are utilizing these grants. They insist on seeing our contracts and our purchase orders before they'll okay us to spend money on that. So we've got a lot of reviewers in our process, evaluating our contracts, evaluating our purchase orders, evaluating our progress on our projects, our compliance with material standards, testing standards, design standards, time of our construction. So particularly, you know, Capital Projects Manager Glorioso Moss is a wealth of information because she goes in really deep with the federal, you know, highway money that we use. The Guadalupe project, I think she's audited almost monthly. So, and we also have our transit administration that gets deep audits from FTA for our use of their money. So we have a lot of, we have DFA watching us, we have FTA watching us, we have Highway Administration, DOT watching us, and we talk. We like, even if I'm managing a road project, I'll get feedback from Ramella about, you know, what her average costs are looking like. And, you know, we have facilities cost projects that we can also compare with. So we work as a real team, and we're all out there executing, getting measurements, getting lessons, getting audits, and sharing the information amongst ourselves.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Director Wheeler, for providing more insight on what that looks like. Really do appreciate it. And it is challenging. Things are really expensive these days. And we know that individuals who are doing construction projects that, their own private homes are seeing it, and we're seeing it as well. I also think this, harkens back to a little bit earlier in the meeting that we do have a bit of an opportunity here. We have capital projects on our list of that we're looking at for the internal audit. And this, is another opportunity for us to say, hey, here's all the things that we're doing. Is there more that we could be doing to make sure that we are being as creative with our spending as possible so that we are really getting the best bang for our buck, while also making sure that we are making enough of an investment in some of these crucial projects, and making sure that we're staying up to date on our maintenance so that, we don't have another footbridge that's costing us $1 million, because if we had done the proper maintenance, this thing's not collapsing. And so I think that that'll be really crucial as we continue to find those balances, as we continue to make investments on a regular basis. Midtown's obviously new project. We have a lot of work that needs to happen, but when we look at the broader spectrum, making sure that we continue to invest so that we are not faced with some of these larger costs when things break. And they collapse, and we're dealing with, these huge reconstructions that could have been prevented if we had been on top of things. So just a note for that as we move forward with the internal audit on capital projects. And thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Councillor Cassett. And Madam Chair, if I may add to the comment about the internal audit, and I noticed that the committee had questioned what the value and how is it implemented. Well, I'll tell you, I read the internal audit report as soon as it came out. And I noticed that the capital program was on the list of high risk. So I read this probably a month ago, probably. And so when I wanted to correct, so I wanted to let you know that we are using it as leaders at the city. It's a really important sort of guiding light, shining light where we could do better, as you said, Councillor Cassett. I wanted to correct what the speaker of the internal audit said, though. However, she said that we had $800 million in capital projects going on. And we have a lot of capital projects going on, but she actually misinterpreted the second paragraph here on page 16 of the audit report. Says that we have an infrastructure capital improvement plan that has $800 million of projects. So that's like all the projects on our sort of, as people say, wish list. And some of those are in process and some of them aren't. She said there's 82 projects ongoing. Actually, even though she got the number from the wrong place, I think that might be darn close. It might be a little bit more than that, but I think that's right around the right number. I think we actually probably have more like $200 million in action right now. And I think that is leveraging more than that. So say we have $1 million for one project, but it's a $30 million project like Midtown, for instance. We have 7 million. We know it's a bigger project overall. So the total project values are large, but the money that we have in hand is nowhere near $800 million. So I just wanted to make that correction. And I also wanted to note that exactly what you said, Councillor Cassett, is in this risk assessment. If you read page 16, which is where they explain the capital program, one of the things they may say is ongoing investment in infrastructure to prevent the failures, which is a really good risk reduction strategy. And I think that the city has just made some big investments with the one-time appropriations into roads and buildings and parks to address some of that.
Just going to clarify that I'm not taking a position that we shouldn't be doing our maintenance for these projects. I'm taking a position that I want to see us get the most for our money. We've had a lot of discussions in here about the CES plan, and we take someone's negotiated bid out of Texas that they did. I'm concerned about it. Not advocating that we don't do the projects or that we don't do the maintenance. All right, I'll make a motion to approve item E.
Second.
Have a roll call, please.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Councillor Cassett,
Yes.
Councillor Lindell,
Yes.
Councillor Faulkner,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Romero Worth,
Yes.
and that motion passes.
Move to approve item F.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councillor Cassett,
Yes.
Councillor Lindell,
Yes.
Councillor Faulkner,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
and Madam Chair, that motion passes as well.
All right, that moves us on to item I. I'm not sure who pulled this. Counselor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Burnett,
Would you like me to read the item, Madam Chair?
please.
Request for approval of a budget amendment resolution to allocate $1.5 million from the general fund available balance to fund moving costs and necessary modifications to allow for relocation of the Planning and Land Use Department staff from City Hall to Market Station offices in the rail yard. And we do have multiple staff members here for this item from Facilities, Public Works, and Land Use.
Counselor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a pretty good discussion over this in Public Works and Utilities Committee. And I think one of the areas that was of interest to us is there was a lot of discussion over a plan. And it's kind of difficult to get a plan of what, why are we doing this? Why are we taking land use and moving, or the intention is to move land use? But it would help to maybe give more of a vision, because I think some of the concerns that that we had at the last committee level were, we just moved a department out of there. We're spending money on a contract, a lease contract at another facility. And now, oh, by the way, we're taking a different department and moving it back to Market Street. Not Market Street, the rail yard area. And so kind of lay out a little bit, because one of the things that I also want to kind of that I do not want to see happen is that we are playing that musical chairs of moving departments around, and obviously to the tune of a lot of money. And I want to make sure and certain that it's justified that if we do take land use, and I think I did request land use to be here or somebody from land use, and I think Interim Director Landboy is here, that it's going to be a smart move. And down the road, are we going to say, okay, well, this isn't working, we're going to try to do something else. And so first off, maybe a little bit of a vision as to, because it's hard to put down a plan, but we do have to have a plan. We have to have kind of with the direction that we're going to take, and kind of the vision as to, why we're doing this, or why we're appropriating this.
Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia, thank you very much for the question. Happy to provide some context. I did send out a little informational packet early this afternoon to everybody, providing some information too. I apologize that went out late, so you may not have had a chance to see it yet. To help kind of build context for this project, there's really 4 pieces that are worth knowing about and understanding. The first begins with our move out of Market Station, which was really related to a community development, economic development effort to enter into a lease agreement with a company known as Specifica. They already exist in the Market Station building. They were looking to expand their footprint. It was deemed a really high economic development priority for the city. And, my role, or my Public Works Facilities Division role in that, is really limited to that entity inside of the city coming to us, asking us to relocate staff to make this venture of theirs possible. And so that's where we stepped in. We identified locations for the 3 departments that were located there: Public Works Administration, Community Health and Safety Administration, Youth and Family as part of that, and Community Development. We did move 2 entities to Marcy Street, and we moved Public Works Administration and a few other orphans to the Monica Roybal facility on Agua Fria. So that's piece number 1. The next piece that I would bring your attention to is that we have a number of issues taking place really throughout the city, but we could consider City Hall kind of a microcosm of the larger situation we're dealing with, which is largely related to, number one, deferred maintenance, and number two, a real lack of functional space for staff and city operations. And right now, City Hall, we have the information I sent out earlier kind of talks about all the different departments or sections that exist within City Hall, the lack of space they have, how it's impacting them, their operations. And, we have staff continuing to come on board with no place to put them. So the first thing that we do as the facilities division is kind of take a high level look at what options we have available. And today, as we look at this space shortage and try and figure out how we are going to adjust to address that, the big obvious opportunity for us is the existence of the vacant market station space. I think you raised the question last week about having moved people out, and do we move those people back in? That I suppose is always something that could be explored. The leases that were entered into on Marcy Street would require either payment in full for backing out of those leases, or we would have to go through a process of trying to find tenants who would become subtenants, essentially tenants of ours, to fill our space at Marcy Street, to try and get those people out of that space back into Market Station, which would still require costs for reconfiguring the space to move them back in, yada, yada, yada. So within that context, we recognize we have these people at Market Street. They are settled there, or at least appear settled there for 4 years. We have a very serious space issue at City Hall. We have the opportunity to relocate an entire department like land use into the Market Station space, freeing up considerable space here that we can then assess and start redeploying to meet the needs of people who remain at City Hall. And so I apologize, I'm naturally long-winded, but those are kind of the first three pieces that I'd like you to consider. And then the final piece is something that's come up a number of times and that we'll finally be bringing to you all. I believe it's the 11th or 17th. I'm terrible with dates, but we'll be bringing a presentation about the work we've kind of background work we've been doing to plan the first steps of the design and construction of a consolidated city services center. And, ultimately our goal is, first, in the meantime, making sure we do everything we can to ensure staff and the public have adequate facilities for operations, and then in the background are working on a longer term plan to kind of begin consolidating staff, moving out of some of the musical chair situations we've gotten into, helping us kind of address deferred maintenance and space issues by essentially moving staff into a new location, allowing us to offload the less functional facilities we have in our portfolio today.
Thank you, Director Burnett. I guess I asked land use to be here because I think that was a little bit of the puzzle that we maybe didn't have at the last committee level meeting. And have you all looked at the area at the rail yard? Is this going to be something that would be sufficient for your purposes? And is it something that you really truly do need? I know that land use it's a division of the city which is very, very important for the development of the city. And are you overgrown? Are you outgrowing? Have you outgrown your space?
Chair Lindell, Member Garcia, with reference to the amount of space, we have functionally outgrown our space. As you know, we're spread across 3 floors, but we have been for a long time. So in terms of the concept of creating a service center where, everything is convenient and accessible and staff has more collaboration space, for instance, between inspections and code enforcement or what have you, that space certainly functions better. We have done preliminary design. Tom Graham, who is the deputy director for building, he is an architect and has done a schematic, and we're going to go over to the space, as a matter of fact, and see how that works out from a functional basis. But we currently have approximately 46 staff in land use, but have approximately 60 positions. And this would accommodate 65 spaces with room to grow. So as you know, our city is not getting any smaller, and we have increasing needs for staff when it comes to development and development review as well as planning. So although, and one other thing that the land use department requested of Mr. Burnett and his team was to request a sort of workspace here at City Hall, because as you know, you see us often here at different meetings associated with the council, and then of course our land use boards. And so we still need sort of a functional workspace, as I like to sit back in my office and do work while I'm waiting for my place in on the agenda.
Thank you. That was gonna kind of allude to the next question that I have in regards to the land use department. If you were to move out of here, how often do you see yourself having to be here, other than obviously meetings? There's planning commission, there's board of adjustment, there's all these other meetings that you're constantly involved in. But what other, so I think I would maybe ask the question from the customer service side of things, because the last thing that I think I want to see happen is when somebody has a land use, building a development, is it all going to be like a one-stop shop, not have to come back and forth to City Hall for certain things in regards to getting what they need done quickly?
Chair Lindell, Councilor Garcia, yes, it will be one-stop shop. So business licensing will also be located over there, as well as, code enforcement, building inspections, and all of the different planning functions. We do have a lot of meetings, but community development also had a lot of meetings at City Hall. And so we would either make do with a hybrid type of situation, or for instance, Alex Ladd was always over here, as was Rich Brown. So we make do with what we have. But the convenience for the customer will be that we're all, we are somewhat all in one place here, but it might be a little more user-friendly in a new market station space.
Thank you. And so that was really kind of the biggest holdup for me, is regards to, is it going to be a step in the right direction as far as us being able to give the community better quality service? I know that it'll have to be a workaround between when you have to connect with other departments. But I think that we've gotten a lot better at being able to collaborate through emails, through Zoom, through Teams, whatever it might be. And so I think those were some of my main concerns. I know we didn't have we moved it forward without recommendation from the last committee meeting. And so I thought it would be something to at least have a slight discussion here at this level before it goes on to governing body. Last question I think I'll have for Director Burnett. Thank you, Ms. Lamboy, for being here for those questions. In regards to, I think you mentioned a little bit about at some point in the future, we have a consolidated city services area. What does that look like? We're just a quick vision on that. I don't want you to go into, we have a few more items on the agenda that we have to discuss, but what's it going to take to get there? Because I don't necessarily like moving people around and back and forth. I know we made a misstep where, it happened. We lost out on an opportunity, which turned in, now we're in a 5-year lease with the Marcy Street deal. And you know, what happens to those offices when it comes, do we renew again, or do we at that point have another area that we can move them into that we're not having to spend money on leases?
Absolutely, Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, thanks again for the question. We are in the final stages of having our presentation for next month, fully vetted and approved for presentation to governing bodies. So I'll keep it high level and not, drop any spoilers today. But what we've looked at, so part of what we've looked at, in terms of location, we've identified, I believe, 3 or 4 locations throughout the city that we've laid out, kind of talking about the positives and negatives of that particular site. In the packet I sent out today, I actually included kind of an analysis of staff numbers and required space that talks about the square footage that we, actually require today to help us kind of gauge where we would end up with that facility, which I believe is right around the, 130 to, about 132,000 square feet based on our current needs with some room built in for expansion. What we envision is trying to locate, design, and build a facility that brings together really all of the city's core and critical functions, creating a location that, again, to use the term that's already been used tonight, create a one-stop shop for the public to be able to come to the city and work through whatever process they need to and be supported by city staff in one location rather than bouncing around the city to get a document here, or get it signed there and deliver it here. And, so I think at the top of our list of vision is figuring out a way or developing a way to better serve the community. And then kind of on the backside of that, developing a facility that allows city to streamline and improve city internal operations, which is really at the heart of providing those better quality services to the public. And so kind of a high level overview, and happy to, answer more questions if you have any.
That's really what I wanted to hear. And with that, I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Councilor Cassett.
Thanks so much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Sam, for being here, and thank you as well, Director Lamboy. A couple quick questions in terms of Market Station, and I, agree. I understand there was some heartburn and things didn't go as according to plan. But I also know that land use, as well as the other departments of the city, have been bursting at the seams for years. So being able to expand there and have more access to the public. A couple things, and I think Director Lamboy, this is probably for you. My understanding is when people come for business licensing, they are paying at the cashier. So what are we going to be, and I don't know about permitting as well, that might be occurring there as well. So what are we going to be doing about payments now that there will be a separation between City Hall and the land use department? Because I do not want to see a scenario where people have to go to Market Station, drive themselves over here to actually just pay.
Lindell and Councilor Cassett, I'm not 100% sure how that's going to function if somebody's paying by check or cash. Occasionally, I think we do have some cash members, but so at this point, it would be completely digital functionality over at Market Station. I certainly could talk with finance to see how that might function in preparation for the council body.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Sam, did you have a?
And Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, excellent question. And, Heather and I started working on this together recently. Prior to Heather's arrival, we had already kind of undertaken some of the conceptual planning of this with former Director Klug. And one of the things that we discussed that we think is viable are there are other entities inside of the city that collect cash remotely, be it cash or check, and actually kind of as part of their daily or weekly closeout are bringing those payments to the cashier's office manually. And so there would be a way to create some continuity, ensuring they would have a window into land use that could accept payments, stamp them as approved, and then those payments would be delivered by staff to City Hall as part of a operational procedure.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thanks for pointing that out. You're right. Like recreation and we have a whole host of places that are accepting dollars. So appreciate that. Glad that's being thought about. And yes, I think that if there is more development about that for the governing body meeting, that'd be wonderful. But I'm really happy to hear that that's a conversation that's already occurring. My other quick question, the door at Market Station, I remember last time I was going there for MPO meetings, it was terrible. It was hard to get in. Sometimes you couldn't open it all the way. Sometimes it was locked when it wasn't supposed to be, or it was unlocked when it wasn't supposed to. So can we get some, have you guys been able to fix that door? And can we please fix that door before land use is going in? Because that's a pain. And I will not finish that sentence.
Madam Chair, Councillor Cassett, thank you for the note. We will add it to the project list and ensure we improve it and its functionality and make sure it works when we move in.
Thank you. I appreciate that. No further questions.
Motion? I have a motion.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
and that motion passes.
Our next item is item P, request for approval of professional services agreement with Bohannon Houston, Inc. to provide on-call general engineering services in an amount not to exceed $5,409,000 for 4 years. I'll just ask a couple of quick questions about this. Is this extension of an existing contract?
No, Madam Chair. This is a new contract.
We already do though have contracts with them?
No.
No?
It's via CES, but we now have our own on-call contract because it's a little bit more expensive if we go via CES.
Okay, I like hearing that. And so this is for 4 years, so it's $1.25 million each year.
If they get awarded a project, yes.
Okay, so here's the question on that. If they bid a project in the first year, is it limited to $1.25 million? Or could they bid a $4 million project and then there's only $1 million left for the other 4 years?
Yes, they can exceed 1 million per quarter or per year. But we can renew their contract if the compensation exceeds $5 million. They have 4 years on this contract, and that's based on the state procurement code.
Okay, so if they used up the entire 5.4 million in the first year, they could come back in year 2 and ask for another contract.
We will renew not renew, but we will amend the compensation in their contract.
All right, does anyone else have any questions? I'll move to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
and Madam Chair, that motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Romello. Next item is item S. Request for approval amendment 1. Citywide price agreement with Safeware Inc. in the total amount of $1 million for public safety, preparedness, safety equipment and solutions to amend the compensation terms in the contract, specifying that payment will depend on budget availability at the time of purchase. Okay. I pulled this item. This is, another price agreement. Have we, gone out and looked for, competitive pricing on these items? I think you're still not turned on there. There.
It's green. Okay. Madam Chair, I did kind of an analysis to compare them with some comparable vendors. And I did find in most cases they are less. This is a tool for the city's toolbox. So it's not a requirement that departments use them or use this contract. I have kind of an end goal in mind. So I'm in favor for the city to do the work that they need to do. So I'm trying to support them from a procurement standpoint. So I get complaints all the time that procurement's overburdensome and complicated, and having citywide price agreements kind of frees up their time to be able to go out on the street and do the work they need to do instead of the administrative piece. The administrative piece is very important. But just to give you a little bit of a synopsis. Arizona, I believe.
Does anyone else have any questions? I'll move to approve.
Second.
Roll call,
Couns-
please. Thank you.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Wendell,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner, Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
and that motion passes.
Thank you.
Being here.
You're welcome.
Our next item is item V. I'm not sure who pulled that. Counselor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam
Please,
Chair.
please proceed.
Just a couple of quick questions because thank you for waiting, and it's been a pretty long meeting here. But is this something that we need to be in alignment with which it seems like we need to be in alignment with something that's been approved by the state of New Mexico? And if we don't make these changes, are we in violations, or is there, what is the underlying issue here in having to change these?
Yes, Madam Chair and Councilor Garcia, thank you for your question. This bill is in relation to House Bill 139, which was passed during the New Mexico Legislature regular session in 2023. So basically, this is just a cleanup bill for our city code. And so this is so that we are not inconsistent with New Mexico state law.
Thank you. So in other words, if we don't change these, then we will not be in compliance with what state law is.
Yes, and in fact, they already went into effect, so we haven't been collecting them. This is mainly just to clean up our code that it's consistent.
Okay, thank you. Just kind of from your perspective, does this help us in, I guess, a little bit be more efficient? I mean, it seems to me like there's a lot of extra work that has to be done to collect these fees and things of that nature. And many times, are we even able to collect the fees? Or a lot of times do they go off to collections?
Madam Chair,
Counselor?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Counselor Romero Worth.
Counselor Garcia, if I can I answer your question?
Sure, yeah, I'm just kind of investigating it a little bit more as to the reasoning behind all of this.
Right. So my understanding is we can't charge these fees anymore because of the state law. And to have them in our ordinances is, if people are looking at our ordinances for accurate information and we say we charge these fees and they're on our books and we're no longer allowed to because we've been preempted by the state, would be misleading to the public. So it is, I think, as has been stated, a cleanup bill to align our ordinances with changes to state law.
Thank you. And that absolutely makes sense. And I do appreciate you being here to answer the couple of questions that I did have. And so with that, if there's no other questions from the committee, I'll move to approve.
Second?
Call, please.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell, Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
and Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes.
Madam Chair, that motion passes.
Thank you. Any matters from staff?
Madam Chair, there is no members, items for staff tonight. Sorry.
Matters from the committee? Matters from the chair. I would ask the real chair, not the fake chair sitting here. Do you have any matters, Chair Romero Worth?
No, I don't. But thank you all for being there, and thank you, real chair, for chairing tonight. I appreciate it.
All right, our next meeting is September 9th. We are adjourned. Thank you.